rival South Sudanese leaders sign a peace agreement in Khartoum. But will it stick? Another U.S. immigration vote comes down to the wire on Capitol Hill. And Dakar Fashion Week highlights the latest African design trends. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. We begin tonight in East Africa, where reaching peace in South Sudan has been an extremely difficult hurdle to clear. The two principals involved in the nation's civil war, President Salva Kiir and opposition leader Riek Machar, have signed a ceasefire agreement on Wednesday that will take effect in 72 hours. The agreement was confirmed by the government after Kiir and Machar met face-to-face talks in Khartoum. The deal calls for the opening of roadways for humanitarian aid, the release of prisoners, and the pullout of military forces, according to Sudan's SUNA news agency. SUNA also reported military forces with the African Union and East African Regional Bloc will oversee the ceasefire. Tens of thousands of people have been killed since the outbreak of the civil war began in 2013, and some 3 million people have been forced to flee their homes. There is a new death toll from last weekend's clashes in central Nigeria. Speaking to reporters on Tuesday after meeting with President Muhammadu Buhari, the governor of Central Plateau State, Simon Lalong, said the fighting between mostly Muslim herders and Christian farmers left over 200 people dead. Other authorities have put the death toll at 86 people. The long-running battles for land resources between the herders and farmers in Nigeria's so-called Middle Belt could prove deadlier than the Boko Haram extremist insurgency, which has killed at least 20,000 people in less than a decade. Longtime foes Eritrea and Ethiopia say they have opened the door of peace after the first high-level visit from Asmara to Addis Ababa in nearly 2 decades. Tuesday's visit has raised hopes for an end to one of Africa's most unyielding military standoffs. The steps towards peace come after Ethiopia's Prime Minister Ahmed Abiy said earlier this month he would honor all the terms of a peace deal, suggesting he might be ready to settle the border dispute, a move welcomed by Eritrea. In a highly symbolic move, the Ethiopian Prime Minister announced Ethiopian Airlines would restart flights to Eritrea for the first time since 1998, when the conflict erupted between the two nations over their disputed border. For more on the latest developments in Ethiopia, I'm joined in studio by VOA's Solomon Abate. Solomon, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Vincent, for having me.
You're welcome. So they say they are opening a window of peace. First, how is this being taken? What is the reaction on the ground from what you're hearing?
Well, there is, a big excitement nowadays in Ethiopia. This is a big addition to all changes, to all efforts that the new Prime Minister has been doing since he took office.
Yeah.
It's less than even 90 days yet. Mm-hmm. So now people are calling him as Prime Minister Bolt. Changes are so
like
fast.
Usain Bolt.
Usain Bolt.
Yes.
Bolt, the Jamaican sprinter. So now there is a big excitement from the citizens inside the country and Ethiopians in diaspora as well.
Now, we're talking about, for example, the announcement that Ethiopian Airlines could start flying to Asmara. What are some of the things actually that stopped happening between these two countries that could make a difference today?
Well, everything froze. During the last 20 years.
Yeah.
The war erupted in May 1998, and ICG estimated that war at about 100,000, between 70,000 and 100,000 Ethiopian and Eritrean youth, and it led to a big economic catastrophe for both countries.
Yeah.
And the relationship between the two countries was interrupted completely.
Yeah.
So everything is now interesting how things are developing, and they vow to reestablish their old relationships between the two countries, one of them, as you mentioned, probably start the resumption of the flight of Ethiopian Airlines to Asmara.
So many people are still baffled by how Prime Minister Abiy can do this when we know that the coalition that rules Ethiopia has been very, very powerful. How is he able to do that? What are you hearing?
Well, as they say, personalities matter. And, things got so wrought, especially the last few years. Change was inevitable in the country. And there had to be someone to lead those changes, Otherwise, as you witnessed, the country seemed, to burst or to explode any time in violence, and it might have been disintegrated. So this leader came out of the EPRDF, the ruling party itself, and there is a coalition of some change-oriented leaders within the ruling party. So Abiy Mohammed was or is one of those leaders, and they are handling.
Now, we saw that explosion over the weekend, and people are concerned. Could there be some people who are strongly opposed, even within the party?
You don't see strong opposition these days in the country, but there are some hidden or clandestine activities in the country. This is it stands as evidence for all this, but there is mild resistance or some kind of hesitation, somewhere.
We'll be watching. We know there will be many developments in the coming days. Solomon, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Vincent.
Well, that's Solomon Abate of VOA's Horn of Africa. Now, as the European Union struggles with the ongoing migrant crisis, the bloc is preparing for a short two-day summit to discuss the top issues beginning Tuesday in Brussels. Now, the differences between the member states over its immigration policy is threatening to tear the group apart. Henry Ritual reports.
More than 100 migrants rescued by a cargo ship off Libya were finally disembarked in Pozzallo, Sicily, Tuesday, having spent 4 days at sea, as Italy initially refused to let the vessel dock.
Since time could have consequences on a humanitarian level, today I appealed to the Italian Interior Minister, Matteo Salvini, who today decided to let the migrants disembark.
Salvini, the head of the far-right Lega party that is part of Italy's governing coalition, visited Libya Monday and reiterated Rome's demands, blocking migrant boats and rescue vessels, the sharing of migrant quotas across the European Union, and asylum centres set up in Africa. His hardline stance threatens a major rift with EU allies.
Now, Salvini, in particular, would really like to have a monumental failure at EU level, because that would suit his narrative about Europe, about migration, and about Italy itself, and about political elites, because that's really his story.
Trying to keep the EU stitched together is Europe's traditional political core, the Franco-German alliance. Facing domestic pressures on immigration, Germany's Chancellor Merkel convened an emergency meeting on migration Sunday, but it was boycotted by several eastern EU states that are refusing to take in quotas of refugees.
In fact, migration is much less of an issue in real terms this year than last, because the number of migrants coming into the European Union has dropped by half. It's a trickle in comparison with what happened in 2015 to 16. That doesn't mean nothing should be done. In fact, the EU needs to have a much more comprehensive approach.
Migration threatens to dominate a summit aimed at addressing several other issues, like Eurozone reform and security cooperation led by France. 9 EU states this week signed off on a joint European military force for rapid deployment in times of crisis. Britain offered its backing, hoping to maintain defence ties as it leaves the EU. Progress in so-called Brexit talks has stalled, raising fears Britain may crash out next March without a deal.
Brexit, I think, is a fairly low priority for most of the other EU 27. It's kind of a pain. It's a technical question that requires a lot of bandwidth. but actually there are these existential issues facing the European Union that actually have nothing to do with Britain.
Last year, EU Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker spoke of a wind in Europe's sails. But storm clouds are gathering that once more threaten to sink European unity, and some fear the EU itself. Henry Ridgwell for VOA News, London.
And that Brussels summit will actually take place on Thursday this week. Back in Washington, the U.S. Supreme Court has narrowly upheld the Trump administration's travel restrictions on citizens of 5 Muslim-majority countries, handing the president a victory on one of his most controversial policies. As VOA's Patsy Widakuswara reports, reaction to Tuesday's ruling was swift.
What do we want?
Demonstrators protested the U.S. Supreme Court's decision to uphold the Trump administration's restriction on travel to the United States for citizens of Iran, Libya, Somalia, Syria, and Yemen.
This is what democracy looks like.
In a 5-4 decision, Chief Justice John Roberts and his 4 conservative colleagues ruled that presidents have substantial power to limit travel from foreign countries for national security concerns. President Trump hailed the decision in a meeting with lawmakers at the White House.
It's a tremendous victory for the American people and for our Constitution. This is a great victory for our Constitution. We have to be tough, and we have to be safe, and we have to be secure. At a minimum, we have to make sure that we vet people coming into the country.
Federal court rulings invalidated or scaled back earlier versions of the travel ban, first introduced in an executive order Trump signed during his first week in office.
We will fight back!
The decision is a huge win for the administration, ending 16 months of legal battles over a key part of Trump's immigration policy, which he campaigned on.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
No ban, no wall!
Opponents say the ban discriminates against Muslims. The Council on American Islamic Relations was one of the plaintiffs before the court.
They are ruining our legacy as a nation, but we are the people, and we the people, and we have the final word through political awareness, political organizing, and the will to change. So while we are very disappointed, we're hopeful that we will work together with other Americans to uphold the ideals this nation was founded upon.
As a practical matter, the decision does not change anything. The High Court allowed the travel ban to take effect last December, limiting travel from the 5 countries included in the ruling, and also North Korea and Venezuela. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News at the White House.
Well, the Senate in the Netherlands has approved a bill that bans wearing full face cover in many public places. The 44-31 vote Tuesday ends a sensitive debate on religious freedom and women's right to wear what they want. The bill bans wearing any types of clothing that completely covers the face except for the eyes in educational institutions, on public transportation, in hospitals and in government institutions. VOA's Zlatitsa Hoek has more.
The approval by Dutch senators follows similar steps in Austria, Belgium, Denmark, France, Germany and Spain, European countries with growing Muslim communities. Right-wing nationalists hailed the decision Tuesday.
I think this is an historical day because this is the first step to de-Islamize the Netherlands. And we think it's necessary because we want to protect our civilization and Western freedoms. And so this is the first step. And the next step is to close all the mosques in the Netherlands.
But critics say the ban is likely to force some women to stay at home even more than they do now.
So they will not have the opportunity to go to school, they will not have the opportunity to go to learn to swim and all those things. So instead of making it better for these women, it makes it only worse.
A Dutch sociologist says the ban could make some Muslim girls more vulnerable.
I also expect that women on the streets will be more vulnerable to definitely to verbal, but also perhaps even to physical attacks.
The government has described the legislation as religion neutral, as it also includes ski masks and full-face helmets. It doesn't go as far as banning burqas in the streets. Violators will be liable to a monetary fine. France was the first European country to ban full-face veil in public places in 2011. The European Court of Human Rights upheld that ban in 2014, rejecting arguments that it infringes on religious freedom. Bans against the Islamic headgear come amid growing fear in Europe that Western culture is threatened by large Muslim communities. Zlarica Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We also want streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Still to come on Africa 54, a discussion with the chairman of the Independent Electoral Commission for the Democratic Republic of Congo. But first, a look at Wednesday's headlines.
In South Sudan, President Salva Kiir and rebel leader Riek Machar agreed to a permanent ceasefire, and it starts within 72 hours. In the DRC, UN investigators accuse government troops and militia of crimes against humanity in the Kasai region, where thousands have been killed and more than 1 million displaced. Eritrea's top diplomat Osman Saleh meets with Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed for the first official visit between the two countries in 20 years. In Niger, migrants stuck in the Saharan city of Agadez can't go forward due to a government crackdown on smuggling and can't return home for fear of danger. Finally, in Kenya, 14 endangered black rhinos are starting to be relocated from Nairobi's National Park to the larger Tsavo East National Park. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.
Well, the chairman of the Independent Electoral Commission for the Democratic Republic of Congo says elections scheduled for December are expected to proceed as originally planned. The chairman, Corneille Nangaa, says his organization will deploy new technology for the voting process. VOA's Peter Clotis sat down with Chairman Nangaa, who says the elections will be transparent and credible.
Because the preparation so far are showing that we are on track, and since we announced the calendar, all the activity we planned has been implemented according to the calendar.
So, do you have the necessary funds that you need in this preparation stage, and how expectant are Congolese to vote in this election?
The election will be funded by the Congolese government, and so far as they have done what is needed to have the result we are getting today, you see that the two laws we are expecting to get are already voted. We completed the voter registrations. We made this processing process with the duplication of the voters, and then we have a voter roll. It went through an audit conducted by the Francophonie organizations, and the result is so clear. It says that DRC have today a voter roll that is inclusive, comprehensive, and even up to date. And all this activity have been funded by the government. It is its responsibility to fund the government, to fund the election. And we will get election in December 2018.
Talk to me about the voter machine.
Yes.
The vote machine that will be used for this particular election. How credible is it? Some machines have failed during the course of elections in other countries.
Who told you?
In other countries.
This is their country. In other countries.
So,
we are in
what
DRC.
makes DRC special?
What makes DRC special is that we are used to technology. I can show you how it works.
All right, sure.
This is a voting
machine that you use.
Any voter will have a ballot paper like this.
Okay.
And this shows that it is not an electronic voting machine. When you talk about the ballot paper we are using before area, you can imagine that
it's very big.
It's a very big ballot paper.
Right.
We have so far as we are going to organize 3 elections the same day, it means that if we use this system, per voter we will need 3 of that.
Right.
All of them, we have put them in one small paper, and this is what we are going to use. Any voter who comes is going to use the voting machine, putting it in the machine. And then it will show, first of all, for presidential election, and all the candidates are there.
Right.
The voter is just going to choose one of the candidates.
Okay.
Confirm it. Legislative elections. Here again, you will choose one, or you will make the choice, confirm, and thirdly, you have provincial elections. Then you will choose one to confirm. When he does that, you have the machine shows the choice he has just made. Meanwhile, he's printing the ballot paper.
Okay.
And you see the ballot paper comes out with all the candidates he has chosen.
Okay.
And this is the ballot paper he's going to put in the polling box.
How many of these do you have to distribute across the country in readiness for the election?
We are going to use 90,000 polling stations. And out of them, we will need more spare. It means 10% or spare. So we have ordered about 106,000 voting machines.
Well, a U.S. federal judge has ordered the government to reunite immigrant parents and children it separated after they crossed the border as part of a preliminary injunction halting those separations unless the parent is unfit or presents a danger to the child. The ruling comes hours before the U.S. House of Representatives is set to vote Wednesday on a measure to keep families together when they are apprehended trying to illegally enter the United States along the border with Mexico. But its fate remains uncertain. The United States says it has over 2,000 migrant children in its custody who were separated from their parents as they illegally enter the country along its southern border. The youths, many from violence-ravaged Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, have been sent to shelters in distant states while their parents are detained awaiting immigration hearing. So far, the government has only reunited 6 children with their parents. Vice President Mike Pence is set to discuss the immigration crisis Thursday in Guatemala with top officials from 3 Central American countries. Now, House Republicans have one last chance to win the votes needed to pass major immigration reform legislation that would fund a part of President Donald Trump's border wall, address the family detention crisis, and provide a pathway to citizenship for 1.8 million undocumented young people. But as VOA's Catherine Gibson reports, this effort, even though it has been touted as a compromise, could prove difficult to pass.
A now familiar call from the president for action at the border.
We have to change the whole immigration picture, and we'll be able to do it. We need the border wall, we need the border, we need border security.
But not the specific boost House Republicans need.
We would love the president to embrace the bill more fully and actively because we think it really reflects where he's at on the issue.
Trump's recent tweet dismissing the bill's chances in the Senate, a major factor putting the bill anywhere from 20 to 30 votes short of the 215 needed for passage. Another issue? Bringing lawmakers together on some parts of the bill, from increasing funding for border security and providing a pathway to citizenship for 1.8 million undocumented immigrants brought to the U.S. as children. Also, an employment verification system, plus significant cuts to the legal immigration system, ending the visa lottery and extended family sponsorship.
Between a far-right conservative base that is not very sympathetic, I don't think, toward resolving the issue of the Dreamers and a path to citizenship, and then the moderate side of the Republican conference that represents more suburban constituents who do want to act on DACA, and add in a very volatile president who has pushed for changes to legal immigration as well. And it just seems too much for this divided Republican conference to wrap its head around.
And the ongoing controversy over detaining children separated from their undocumented parents adds even more urgency to the vote.
Hopefully Congress will pass a law and fix the problem. Well, why should it be so hard? They all say that they don't want to separate families. Seems like it should be pretty simple to me.
At issue, a court settlement that says the government can't hold children more than 20 days, making it impossible to detain families together. Immigration authorities argue that ruling ties their hands. House Speaker Paul Ryan says the broader immigration bill, which also addresses the issue of detained children, deserves a chance before tackling the 20-day rule.
I want to lean into that vote and do as well as we possibly can on that vote, and then if that doesn't succeed, then we'll cross that bridge.
A bridge lawmakers will have to cross quickly, with just 2 working days left before the start of an 11-day holiday recess. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Capitol Hill.
Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. Dakar Fashion Week in Senegal, one of the continent's oldest fashion exhibitions, reveals stunning looks by designers from across Africa. A total of 35 designers from Senegal, South Africa, Mali, Nigeria, and Guinea-Bissau, among other countries, showcased their collections during this year's Fashion Week event in Dakar. South African designers were the talk of the town with their bold and innovative creations. The annual event was also an occasion to encourage businesses, giving an opportunity to the fashion community as a whole, photographers, journalists, makeup artists, hairstylists, musicians, and to bring fashion back to the people. Well, next up, a Swiss startup is hoping to use blockchain technology to decentralize the business of art dealings. As its name implies, blockchain is a chain of digital blocks that contain records of transactions. The tech provides a new platform and marketplace for artists, galleries, museums, and art buyers to exhibit, explore, and even acquire works in the virtual world. Rather than dealing with auction houses or other intermediaries, transactions are carried out using the startup's new Alatcoin cryptocurrency. Well, and finally, engineers and researchers are trying to make world cities better, safer, and smarter. In China's Hangzhou city, there are hundreds of traffic lights and video surveillance cameras across the city. Chinese tech giant Alibaba has spent the last 2 years working with traffic police on a cloud computing system called City Brain to make the cameras smart enough to recognize or even forecast anomalies on the road. With real-time video processing, City Brain can report possible car crashes, confirm accidents in 20 seconds, and even automatically alter traffic lights to let ambulances drive through. And that's what's trending today. That's our show. Thank you very much for watching. We look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. This expression sounds like a violent way of eating, but it's actually not always about eating.
Here is your Russian book, Anna. Thanks for letting me borrow it.
Oh, are you done with level 1 already?
Yeah, I finished last week, and I've already finished level 2.
Wow, you are really sinking your teeth into learning Russian.
Well,